Why breaking free from toxic relationships feels impossible, but isn't. There's a strange paradox when it comes to toxic relationships. We know they're harming us. We feel the weight of them draining our energy, twisting our emotions, making us question our own reality. And yet we stay. We rationalize. We make excuses. We tell ourselves that love is supposed to be hard, that people change, that maybe we're just overreacting. But deep down, in the quiet moments where no one is watching, we know the truth. We know we're trapped. And the scariest part, the cage isn't made of metal bars or locked doors. It's made of our own mind. Why is it so hard to walk away from something that is clearly destroying us? Why do we cling to the very thing that is breaking us? The answer isn't as simple as because we love them. Love is part of it, but love alone doesn't chain us to suffering. What truly keeps us stuck is something far more insidious: fear. The fear of the unknown, fear of regret, the fear that maybe, just maybe, this is the best we'll ever get. And that fear is an illusion, but when we're inside it, it feels as real as the air we breathe.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Toxic relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, have a way of distorting our sense of self. They make us question our worth, our judgment, our ability to be loved in a way that doesn't hurt. And this is by design. A toxic dynamic often thrives on imbalance. One person needs control, and the other slowly loses themselves in the process. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, almost imperceptible ways. A cutting remark disguised as a joke, or a boundary that gets pushed just this once. A moment of deep emotional connection that convinces you to overlook the pain that came before it. Before you realize it, you're caught in a cycle, one that keeps you hoping, waiting, believing that things will be different this time. But here's the harsh truth. Things don't change just because we want them to. People don't suddenly wake up and decide to treat us better because we've been patient. The cycle doesn't break itself. And yet, knowing this doesn't make leaving easier. Because leaving isn't just about walking away from a person. It's about walking away from an identity, a version of ourselves that we built around that relationship. And that's terrifying. Think about it. Who are you outside of this relationship? Outside of the chaos, outside of the emotional push and pull? If you've been in a toxic dynamic long enough, the answer might be, I don't know. Because when we're constantly managing someone else's emotions, constantly trying to keep the peace, constantly questioning our own reality, we lose touch with who we are. And that's why leaving feels like stepping into an abyss. It's not just loss, it's the unraveling of an entire way of being. But here's the thing about the abyss. It only looks empty from where you're standing. The fear of leaving convinces you that nothing good exists on the other side, and that you'll be alone forever, that no one will understand you the way they do, even if they hurt you, that maybe this pain is better than the unknown. This is the biggest lie. Toxic relationships tell us that we are safer in the suffering we know than in the freedom we don't. So the question is, how do you break free when everything in you is telling you that you can't? How do you walk away when your heart is still tangled in the idea of what this relationship could be? The illusion of love, why we mistake attachment for connection. One of the greatest deceptions of a toxic relationship is that it convinces us what we are experiencing is love. The highs, the lows, the feeling of being entwined so deeply with another person that we cannot see where they end and we begin it feels intense, all-consuming, impossible to replicate. And because of this, we mistake it for something sacred, something rare. But is it really love? Or is it something else entirely? Love, in its purest form, does not leave you questioning your worth. It does not make you feel small, uncertain, or trapped. It does not demand that you shrink yourself to be tolerated. But attachment can do all of these things while whispering in your ear that you cannot live without it. And this is where so many of us get lost. We confuse intensity with intimacy. We confuse chaos with passion. We confuse familiarity with destiny. And the more we invest, the harder it becomes to see the difference. Psychologists have studied the way human beings form emotional bonds, and one of the most powerful findings is that unpredictability strengthens attachment. When affection is given inconsistently, when love is dangled like a prize, and then suddenly withdrawn, it creates a cycle where we chase, we hope, we crave the return of what once felt so good. This is not love. This is conditioning. Pay. The same way a gambler keeps pulling the lever of a slot machine, hoping for a win, we keep investing in toxic relationships, believing that if we just love harder, if we just endure longer, the reward will come. But the truth is, the game is rigged. The love we are waiting for, the version of this person that lives in our imagination, will never arrive in the way we need it to. And yet, we stay, because the idea of losing it completely feels more unbearable than the suffering of staying. This is where the mind plays its cruelest trick. It convinces us that leaving is a betrayal not just of the other person, but of ourselves. We think of all the time we've invested, all the memories, all the moments when things were good, and we tell ourselves that to walk away would mean those moments meant nothing, that we were foolish to believe in them, that we were wrong to love in the first place. And so we cling not to the present reality, but to the potential of what could be. We tell ourselves that no one else will ever understand us the way this person does, that no one else will ever make us feel the way they did in the good moments. But ask yourself, did they truly understand you? Or did they understand just enough to keep you tethered? Did they truly love you? Or did they love the power they had over you? Breaking free from a toxic relationship is not just about leaving a person. It is about unlearning everything we have been taught about love, about our own worth, about what it means to be connected to another human being. It is about recognizing that real love does not require us to suffer as proof of its depth, but that real love is steady, not a roller coaster of extreme highs and devastating lows. That real love does not ask us to abandon ourselves in order to keep it alive. Why do we still feel like we can't walk away? Why does the idea of leaving feel like cutting off a part of ourselves? Because in many ways it is. When we have been in a toxic relationship long enough, it fuses with our identity. We forget who we were before. We forget what life felt like when we weren't constantly navigating someone else's emotions, when we weren't walking on eggshells, when we weren't trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. And that's why leaving feels like stepping into nothingness. Not because there is nothing out there for us, but because we have been conditioned to believe that this relationship was the only thing that gave us meaning. But here's the truth. The love you are fighting so hard to hold on to is not the love that will set you free. The connection you have convinced yourself is irreplaceable is not the connection that will bring you peace. And the person you believe completes you is not the person who will help you become whole. The only way to truly escape is to see the illusion for what it is, to recognize that love does not feel like imprisonment, and that loneliness inside a relationship is far more painful than loneliness outside of one. The real question is not, can I leave? The real question is, what am I so afraid of facing if I do? The fear of being alone, why we stay even when we know we should leave. There is a moment in every toxic relationship when we realize, with undeniable clarity, that this is not where we are meant to be, that the pain outweighs the joy, that the version of ourselves we have become is a shadow of who we once were. And yet, even with this knowledge, we hesitate, we stall, we convince ourselves that maybe things will change. Maybe we are expecting too much. Maybe leaving will be worse than staying. But beneath all these rationalizations, there is one quiet, unspoken fear that holds the most power over us. The fear of being alone. It is a fear that runs deeper than we like to admit. Because it is not just about physical solitude. It is about the terrifying silence that comes when the noise of the relationship is gone. It is about facing ourselves without distraction, without an identity built around someone else's needs. It is about waking up in a bed that feels too big, walking through a world that suddenly seems emptier, realizing how much of our life was intertwined with another person, even if that person was hurting us. We stay because the thought of rebuilding feels overwhelming, because the idea of starting over, of explaining to people why we left, of admitting that we spent months or years in something that was breaking us, feels like too much to bear. We stay because we have been conditioned to believe that being alone is a failure, that it is better to have a painful love than no love at all, that our worth is somehow measured by whether or not someone chooses us, even if they choose us in a way that leaves us feeling unseen, unheard, and unloved. But here is the truth we don't want to face. The fear of being alone is often just a fear of meeting ourselves. Because once the relationship is gone, once the distractions are stripped away, we are left with nothing but our own reflection. And for many of us, that reflection is uncomfortable. We see the wounds we have ignored. We hear the doubts we have silenced. We feel the weight of all the times we abandoned ourselves just to hold on to someone who was never fully holding on to us. But what if being alone is not the terrible fate we imagine it to be? What if, instead of running from it, we leaned into it? What if solitude was not a punishment, but a return to ourselves, to our own voice, to a way of living that is no longer dictated by someone else's approval? Because here's the thing, the loneliness we fear is often nothing compared to the loneliness of staying in a relationship where we are not valued. We tell ourselves that leaving will break us, that we are not strong enough to endure the loss. But the reality is, we have already been breaking, just in much smaller, quieter ways. Every time we ignored our intuition, every time we made excuses for mistreatment, every time we swallowed our voice to keep the peace. The difference is, leaving is a break we choose. A break that offers the possibility of healing instead of one that keeps wounding us over and over again. And so, the real question is not, what if I end up alone? The real question is, what if being alone is exactly what I need to finally find myself again? Reclaiming yourself, how walking away leads to true freedom. There is a moment after leaving a toxic relationship that feels like free fall. The world is quieter, emptier. The absence of chaos feels unnatural, almost eerie, as if something is missing. And for a while it is. Not because the relationship was good, but because it consumed so much of our identity. We spent so long trying to navigate someone else's moods, walking on eggshells, managing conflict, hoping for change, that when all of that is stripped away, we don't know what to do with the silence. But this is where the real transformation begins. This is where we start to reclaim ourselves, not in a dramatic, overnight revelation, but in the small, quiet moments where we begin to remember who we are. At first, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like loss, like something is missing, like we've erased a part of our own story. And in those moments, the mind plays tricks on us. It reminds us of the good times, the laughter, the connection, the moments when things felt perfect. It tempts us to reach back, to revisit, to convince ourselves that maybe we overreacted, maybe we were too harsh, maybe we should have stayed just a little longer. But this is an illusion, the same illusion that kept us trapped for so long. The truth is, if something was truly right for us, it would not require us to suffer to keep it alive. Freedom from a toxic relationship is not just about physical separation. It is about emotional detachment. It is about unlearning the patterns that kept us stuck, the beliefs that made us think we had to tolerate mistreatment to be loved. It is about confronting the parts of ourselves that accepted less than we deserved and understanding why we did. Because if we don't, we will repeat the cycle. We will find different faces with the same energy, different names with the same wounds. We will mistake intensity for love again. We will ignore red flags again. We will shrink ourselves again. Unless we choose differently. Unless we do the work to heal. Healing is not just about time passing. It is about what we do with that time. It is about sitting in the discomfort of solitude and not running from it. It is about rediscovering the parts of ourselves that we silence to keep someone else happy. It is about learning to trust our own voice again and to recognize that our intuition was never wrong, we just learned to doubt it because someone else made us feel like we couldn't trust ourselves. And here's the most beautiful part. One day, without even realizing it, we wake up and the weight is gone. The memories lose their grip. The longing fades. The love we thought we could only find in that person, we begin to find within ourselves. And the relationships we attract after that, whether friendships, romance, or even our relationship with ourselves, are no longer built on fear or desperation or the need to prove our worth. They are built on something real, something steady, something that does not ask us to abandon ourselves in order to keep The real question is not what if I never find love like that again. The real question is what if that was never love at all? And what if, by walking away, you are finally making space for something that is?